Great. My name is Francesca Frankie Altamura, and I'm a New York-based curator and organizer in conversation with Chicago-based artist Taína Cruz, who is participating in Control the Virus Volume 3, a year-long digital exhibition curated by Martin Mayorga and Vanessa Morel, founders of Data Eagle Art, and Saba Jabbar, founder and artist of Her Visions. Thanks for joining me in conversation today. We should take the time to sort of unpack your work, Solar Time Ritual, that was created this year for Control the Virus 3. So are you able to sort of speak about the work's origins?
Yeah, um, just want to say thank you and many blessings for being here today. And I also want to acknowledge the land that I'm on, which is the Potawatomi Nation here in Chicago, just giving thanks to, keeping the land alive and such like that. And yeah, as you mentioned, my work is called Solar Time Ritual. It's like one of my only projects that's like straight to the point in terms of its like name. And essentially, this is a browser-based ritual where users, the viewers, participants are transported into this digital oasis where they basically collect this metaphysical medical bag with ancient and prophetic artifacts that I put together. And as they go along this journey, they're sort of like having these moments of honesty and reflection about themselves, but also a comedic, lighthearted way of like understanding how we navigate and be mindful on the internet is just like overall what I'm trying to like portray with the ritual. And each object as itself really serves as this like mindfulness checkpoint and the subtle reminder that ancestral eras exist simultaneously with the present. I think throughout my overall body of work, I want this like constant reminder that our ideas, our knowledge, our stories, our songs and rituals are based upon our ancestors and indigenous wisdom and how they exist within us today, and how could we just like cultivate that knowledge in order to just continue surviving and living. And so hopefully, through that project, it's just giving a very just like a not so much, I guess, a strict ritual, like, very much like a proper way of doing things. I want it to be just a fun journey for the viewers to go through this like fantasy sort of oasis and just collect the objects throughout the time. Um, Another really cool element about the oasis is just how it's also a generative environment. So what it reacts sonically with the individual's location to adapt in tandem with the sun. So that itself is just really invoking another layered notion of time. And I really wanted there to be just like there is a sense of lostness within the space, which I really admire as like a utopian feeling of I don't have to have this sense of time, but also there is that reminder that the sun is its own version of a clock, and you'll no matter what, if you see the sun, it will tell you what the time of day is, so you can't really just like escape that. So I wanted to have this like an awareness of what time it is on the internet, and I think the sun is like a perfect vehicle to allow the viewers to, I guess, remember, I'm still alive and it's morning at like 11 a.m. and I could tell because the sun is like this way. So I thought that was really cool to bring that into a digital space.
Yeah, there's another work by Natalia from Control the Virus 3 too that's sort of paying homage to the sun. And I just found it to be a real coincidence too. Like this, maybe we shouldn't call it a newfound interest of the sun, but just a real sort of awakening and appreciation of it in today's like very dark times. So yeah, I guess, yeah, how come, that sort of became your like muse?
Yeah, no, exactly like as you said, how like the sun has been around for the beginning. So like how could you even just like there's infinite ways for you to just like find a romantic relationship with the sun, or just like find ways to communicate with the sun that others hasn't before. But I mean, it's been around since like it's been around. So I think like what I really appreciate about Natalia's work was just like that specific aspect of using science and data and technology and collaborating with scientists to really, I guess, observe the sun and ask questions as we do as a civilization. Whenever there's something so powerful and so forceful, we ask questions, we take notes, we like, we want to like find the formulas to like discover what A plus B is, and it has to be this way. And so I think that's like really refreshing to me to like understand that there are people with like equipment who are like visually like trying to track and stuff. And so whereas me, I was throughout this whole year, I've been like really using the sun as this like a more spiritual embodiment type of way, and to the fact that like I incorporated the sun in like my weekly daily routine. And so like more specifically following along with like I guess like using meditating during the planetary hours, for example. So like understanding that the Sunday is like the sun's day, and then the Monday is the moon's day, and then like I don't know, Saturday is Saturn's day. So there's like already these like days in which like the planets correlate with our, it gets in tuned. I mean, maybe it's like scientifically proven, maybe it's not, but I mean, you will recognize after you meditate, like you have the planet's like vision in your mind as just like a secondary advancement, and sorry, not advancement, enhancement maybe. So like when I'm meditating with the sun in mind, I'm starting to think of, okay, what do I need to burn up that's like no longer necessary in my routine? Just like like subconsciously the sun is like providing nutrients in order for me to like continue on. And planets, they do that, and I think that's like really interesting for me, I guess, to like think about the spirit of the planets more so than like the technical side. Just because like I I just like growing up, I was very much into like the binary of like coding, and like there only has to be one right answer and such, even when it going along with like my theoretical like understanding and like studying of like history. I was like, okay, there like really like one answer, one like yes or no sort of type of answer. And I think it wasn't until like I was doing a lot of like self-healing and like reflection that I was like, that's kind of like a waste of time for there to be like this like binary way of understanding. And so that same concept goes with into like time as well. Like I'm like I understand that I can create my own time, and I don't know, that's how I've been like living every day since like I really had that sense of reflection understanding, and it's been doing wonders for me. Like I feel like it's like physically there. I don't have to like prove that time is this like imaginary concept. And so I see that being reflected back to like what I said was like meditating with the sun and like using the sun as more of like this understanding that okay, people have clearly been like knowing that the sun is this like a powerful energy source for you to do like many like reach many levels. And so I just really wanted to like cultivate that into like my own ritual, and like you can always like learn what other people, other like communities have been doing with the sun. But honestly, I haven't found like any storytelling or folklore within the African American community, and specifically like a ritual surrounding the sun. But I know it's there. Like my grandma, she uses the sun to like to farm, and my great grandma used the sun to like cultivate the land. And so there is already a hidden ritual. And so for me, I guess I'm myself, I'm just like marking that ritual, and I'm marking a tradition of appreciation of the sun that's already was existing in my family for forever. Yeah.
That's great to hear and sort of unpack what your relationship is to the sun. And I'm wondering, you spoke about the virtual world that you created as an oasis. Is this a sort of utopian concept for you, or what led you to this oasis?
Yeah, no, I really love just like talking about utopia in general, just because like you can bring up like ideas and concepts of like science fiction and fantasy and mythology. Like I mean, like it's just like a fun, just a starting point. And so, and for me, like so I create a lot of like mind maps when I start to like begin projects and things like that. And so I did have utopia as like one of like just a word, like a bubble written. And then connected to that was like internet, of course. Like the internet is this like playing field of like everyone is supposed to be equal. You can create these worlds, you can code these worlds to like for you to be the king of the world and create this utopia of yourself. And so as a child, literally growing up with the internet as this like creating this like utopic way of understanding of, you know, no matter who you are or what you look like, you could be the like the next big thing, or you can create this safe space. And so I have always been taking in those like hidden, I guess, not hidden. I mean, no, it's definitely hidden. Like the way Tumblr, for example, is like coded so you can like blog, like only certain people can see your blogs. Like that's just like a very hidden way of like creating your own utopia. And so I grew up like as a five, like not 5 years old, but like as a, yeah, a 7, 8 years old, I could create my own world. And so I had that just like reflection, just growing up with my art practice. But then what also really grounded me with these concepts of utopia was Black studies, the Black utopian concept. You know, W.B. Du Bois, Richard Wright, Octavia Butler, they've all written these like ideas of how can African American vision themselves as socially equal, or, you know, ontologically equal to others. And so, I mean, my background also is just like very much into critical race theory and trying to just like figure out these like ideas that, you know, there's no answer. So of course, like you have to like read what others are researching and doing and stuff like that. And so, but these answers of a utopia it's written already by these like Black researchers and authors. And so their idea was just like, you know, just how could we survive and combat oppression that was like, as the world was also like on the verge of like dystopia. And sometimes it feels like it's hard to say that I am daring to speculate like what a future is beyond white supremacy, because like I sort of just like I that's not like in my forefront in terms of like what a utopia is, to like center something negative. At least that's what I am coming from. But you know, there's always these like visions within the Black community about like what utopia looks like. And then from like the mythical side, we have like Sun Ra and like his idea that, you know, let's all transport everyone to Saturn and then like create our own world there. So these ideas is just like, it's written in history, the utopian is there. And so I myself am finding myself that I could create these utopias because I have that, I guess, history and knowledge of like my family being here for over 400 generations, and I don't have that history and like written knowledge. So I don't have any choice but to create like a historical utopic way of understanding, I guess, my heritage. And so yeah, and I just think that, sorry, I'm like trying to just like I'm just, it's always fun to like see like the thoughts just like flying across. But I think like with science fiction and its like aspect of like blurring the lines of like reality, I think like that's when I'm becoming weary of, because like I at the same time feeling like you're surviving in America is like a sort of like fantasy superhero type of way. Like you could immediately imagine that like I'm just like I'm seeing not oppression, but I'm seeing like survival as like a magical thing, but it's not magical at the same time. Like it's not science fiction to me. Like these ideas of like finding new territories or new ways of like new environments, conquesting other planets. Like yes, it is science fiction, but it's also a reality for me. So at the same time, I feel like I'm challenging these like ideas of science fiction or these notions of like fantasy or mystical. Like and that goes along with spirituality. Like I feel like now at the same time people are using, I don't want to say like people as a society as a whole, but I do see this concept of like spirituality masking over, you know, whatever wronging you had in your life, or whatever sort of like, you know, not repentant, but like something that you are, it's not a gateway. I'm just thinking of words right now, but like it's a vehicle to just like become like a higher version of yourself. But that higher version is also just like ignoring others. And so I think that is also where I'm also kind of like, I want to jab at that idea and like bring that into life like, this is so hilarious how this is how you're taking it. But it's also a reality for me in terms of like the spirituality is a real thing for me. And so, and I see I guess like I see the way it could harm others at the same time. So that's also something I love like challenging playing with.
Yeah, I think, not only is solar time ritual a very like complex work, as is your practice, because it's really dealing with sort of everything. It's dealing with spirituality, like, and very grounded notions. It's dealing with sort of Black radical theory, but also like, everyday survival of Black people in America, in the diaspora, everywhere. But also dealing with familial history and erasure and sort of revival and all of these things. So you sort of covered a question that I was going to ask. So maybe switching modes to the more technical aspects of solar time ritual. Can you speak how it came about to be a sort of web-based browser work?
Yeah. So like just like within my body of work in general, I like to really go back into like storytelling or just like folklore, mysticism that has happened within my family that like either I wasn't supposed to know, but I was able to find out, or I like was like digging deep to like try to find the connections. And so one of the main things of like science fiction or just like rituals and um, within my family. I wouldn't say science fiction within a family just because that's not really giving the honor I feel like it deserves, but just like yeah, the fantasies or like the spells or rituals that was like placed upon my family that I didn't really like see, or maybe it was like my subconscious was like purposely telling me to ignore it until I was like at that time that I had the experience to like really bring that into my art practice. And so um this idea of just like the technique. So I started off with just like thinking about, okay, how has like what are surviving tools that I remember my grandma telling me, my great grandma telling me in stories that like maybe it wasn't like out right there. And so one of the big things that she was also like always telling me was just like working and tending to the farm out front of her house. So that was like I started off thinking about like maybe I can do a project around that. And then she was always talking about the sun. Like the sun was like just like this forceful energy out in North Carolina that was just like wanting to provide a lot of life force, but it was also just like it's hindered a lot of people working outside. And so I think like the sun has its like pros and cons. So that I was thinking about like maybe just like a simple project surrounding the sun. And so thankfully backed by like my ancestors, I was able to just like conceptually enhance these like ideas of how can the sun be brought into the internet. Like I myself love the internet. I use the internet. I don't like I use the internet in my work. I love like using computers and talking about like modems and CDRMs like in my work and algorithms in my work. So I was like, maybe like, do I do like a sun algorithm? Like this is actually like me like going through this whole process. And I was like, no, like not no like that, but I was just like, I feel like it's necessary for me to just like relate and like ancestral something that's not physical into a digital where it could potentially be digital like physical, if that makes sense. Like I always like wonder and question, is it possible to like transcribe these like fairy tales or these like um your grandmother's secrets into something physical online? Like can you even like do spells online? Can you do magic online? Like I don't, can you meditate online? Like things like that is just like questions that were in the beginning stages. And so I'm always interested in like digital spiritualism and like how could we like, is it possible to like go through an altered state in a Zoom call? Like something like that is just like I love like I guess like trying to find the satirical ironic sense to it and then like bring that into my project. And so I started off like I was like, do I should I have like people like really like I don't know like summon the sun god or something? Like do I want them to do something bizarre like that, but like I am in control? So something interesting is just like I have the control to like create my own history. And that's exactly what I'm doing with this project, is like creating a history that was like purposely not given to me due to the higher, white supremacy or colonialism, etc. So since I myself am writing this new history, I like to like play along, like play the participants, or just like not trick the participants, but just like recognizing how like bizarre it is that I feel like I have to do this. I have to like make sure that like my family is remembered in the future. And I always think about like how could I bring indigenous knowledge into the future, because it's being lost, it's being erased intentionally. And that's just like, I think along the way I have to provide a comedic sense to that. And so going back to the technical side, like once I had like, okay, I'm gonna do a ritual based that has a sun being just like a guiding figure. I thought about my objects. I was just doing a lot of just like thinking of like just thinking about what objects I would want people to just like pick up. And so it's not like a bunch of random objects. It may seem like that like as a whole, but I love like how weird it is in terms of, so I'll give like two examples. There's like there's like a statue of like this scorpion mouse character that I found in Tumblr years, like early 2012 or something like that. And so this mouse scorpion figure has been just like circulating on my Tumblr feed for quite some time. And so I was like, maybe I want to like memorialize that. And so I did. And that's like now part of like my artifact. And then another one is like this slug that I have that like sucks the energy out of like other slugs. So it's just like something like that is like has like a, I myself see the connection. I think it's just fun for others to also just like pick up those like these these objects as like their own, or like as their own discovery and stuff like that. Um, and so, yeah, back to the more technical. Once I had my objects and like an idea of my environment, I knew I wanted like the sun thrives most in the desert, but then I also love plants. And so I was like, okay, a lush full desert, and then oasis is already a name for that. So I was like, okay, I want an oasis. And so I found this like really talented 3D artist named Sam, and he was able to like create, and like he creates a lot of like mystical landscapes and things like that digitally, like a blend on Blender. And I was like, I need to have this for my project. So I reached out to him, and he created like an amazing like oasis for me. And so I had the oasis, and then I hired people that I worked, my classmates from college. So they were also my studio mates in senior year. So closest home is their 3D like modeling team and stuff like that. So I hired them to create my objects, and just being able to like work with them outside of like the school setting in a more professional way was like really cool. It was my first time really hiring a team of people to like create this like project for me, and I felt it was really cool to have like the time, a whole year, to just like really structurally plan like who is going to do what, and then such and such. And so once I got the objects from them and the environment, they're placed in random areas. And so I'm creating a sound. So each object is like invoking this, I don't want to describe it. It's going to be kept a secret, but it's basically like the sound is just supposed to invoke something out of you. Like I really just enjoy like playing with sensory, like digital sensories to the viewers, because I always, like, as I said, I question like, is it possible to like reach these altered states of yourself online? And I don't know, I like to play along with that. So I'm doing that with sound, and then I'm, along with the objects and the sound, is like creating my own small stories. And yeah, it's just like I'm creating my own like land, my own, I don't know, fairy tale. And I think that's like, it's cool to be in that position at times. And whereas other times I feel as though I'm letting my work like speak for itself, or I'm letting my objects and painting like just like really have like its own sense of control. Whereas I feel like I'm in the position now where I could like control exactly like what it is. So hopefully that made sense. And so yeah, and I think like um I really like, I wanted just an object that was just like a trace, a memorial, not memorabilia, just a very like a something that exists within the internet, but something I can also bring out of the internet, something that is just a representation of my family being here for 400 years. And I do think that like this project is like hinting at that. And it's like, you know, it's not in your face like this is like my family is doing like has been surviving this, but it's like just a recognition of like how our people who like just how a lot of people and their histories have been erased, but it's still being used today subconsciously and without any recognition. I think it's important to be, I guess, thankful and honoring that sort of information. um and then quickly another like way of like how I go over like my technical thing, I love to like look at primary sources and really like go back into the archives to see like what has already been done and like said, like because like all of my ideas, I understand it's not nothing new. Like people have been studying mystic mystic magic in the internet, regardless if it's called the internet or technology. Like Black authors and scholars have already been talking about cyber theory in their work. And so I feel like I myself am like just like prolonging that like conversation, hopefully. And like one thing that's like really important was just like, along with spirituality, of course, you can associate that with religion. And on my mom's side, they're heavily spiritual base. Like they're raised as like a Southern Baptist, like Christian. So really like that like subcategory of hot, steamy church house prayer and like stomping on the ground worship. Like I just being in that sort of like heavy like prayer sort of like space, it has allowed me to a sort of like I totally rejected all of that as a child, but I see myself just like bringing that information in because it's giving me the answers that I need. So it was interesting to see how in one of the sermon of like, let me see his name. His name is Reverend A.W. Nix. He's a Baptist preacher in Birmingham. And he always like began his sermons in the early 20th century talking about the solar system, and he would describe the solar system as like the celestial walk of like I don't know of just higher being. So it was interesting to see this like very like heavy Christian based pastor talking about the solar system in a more also aligned with like the everyday practice survivals of Black Christianity. His quote was, "View the flying stars and flashing meteors, and then pass on by Mars and Mercury and Jupiter and Venus." And so, like to see like this like very like a conservative church talking about astrology in that way, like it goes to show for me like how maybe not how not I wouldn't say ignorant, but sometimes I do have to recognize that like my my ideas or just like my findings or research or just like my theoretical understandings have also been like discussed with like people who don't need to be in an institution to like understand these concepts. And so that's something that I'm also like grasping at. Like I understand that I don't have to be only using scholars as like a primary search where like these are already talked about in our community members and leaders. And so I love like finding the magic within the community leaders and stuff like that.
It's so cool to hear from you about this because you're really giving me, like many layers of your, personality too. You're giving me sort of mystic, you're giving me creator, builder, historian, archivist, all of these things combined, which are all, very important within your works. To wrap up this Q&A, I did want to touch base a little bit about the merchandise that you're offering alongside the work, because I know, as you just told me before we started recording, that it has real significance, and you've done a lot of labor and put in your spiritualness to these objects. So can you, tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the merch is basically a crystal pendant and a bag. And just to describe more of that, the crystal pendant is called a citrine calcite crystal, and it's basically I sunbathe those crystals under the sun for 5 days, and so they're basking in the sun, filled with intentions and so forth. And I really think like bringing in an earthly material into our everyday practice, as just like not saying like you have to carry it with you, or just like you have to carry rocks, or just like carry, I don't know, aspects of the metaphysics into your everyday being, but just like understanding that like the earth is providing us life sources for us to use. Like it did take a lot for me to like bathe it under the sun and stuff like that. But I think to have it be like a long lasting memorabilia was also just like very important. And so basically holding and keeping along with the journey of like the like going through the reflective oasis labyrinth, just like understanding, and like if you're holding the crystal, you'll able to just like like get a sense of present time again. And I think that's also important when like accessing the internet and the digital space, is just like reminding yourself that you are this physical being and you are alive and like you are well and healthy and like you can continue moving. And so I like having reminders. I'm a very like, I need objects to remind me of things sometimes. And so I think that that is like a perfect vehicle for, you know, to remind, to be, allow yourself to be present within the internet. And so, and then along with the crystal pendant will be like a bag of like, it's technically like a Dungeons and Dragons name called Bag of Holding, which is supposed to be this like magical bag where like you can put anything in it and so forth. And so I sort of like, as a child loving video games, and like even those like retro video games where like you just have a bag and like you can fill a whole house in it, for example, I like, I have those, it's just like a very fond warm memory of that. So I was like, I'm going to create my own bag of holding. And so essentially it's just like not just it's a drawstring bag that goes along with the crystal pendant, just to have like a safe home for it. And I think it's cool to like, you know, as you go along with your journey and you have the bag with you, you can just like put whatever you don't want to like think about anymore imaginary in your bag, or even like write it out in your bag and just like not even think about it anymore. And I think just like that physical way of like, you know, leaving things behind, or just, I think it's helpful for growth. And that's something that I did in order for healing. Like I'm every day, I'm like constantly trying to find ways to just grow and heal from whatever I don't, just from life, you know, we have like a lot to just like unpack as just people. And so I think just like having just like an ability, just like 5 seconds out of your day to just like throw whatever was upsetting you last night into the bag and just like forgetting about it, it helped in. And I think that's, yeah, the merch is cool.
It was great speaking with you. I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Blessings.
Blessings.